What if a single moment, a single response, could expose the emptiness of an entire generation of leaders and ignite the rebirth of a continent? In Addis Ababa, inside the Grand Hall of African Diplomacy, such a moment happened. A barefoot boy from Ouagadougou, now a young captain, stood before presidents and prime ministers, and with just a few words in Arabic, changed Africa forever. Full script. The Grand Conference Hall in Addis Ababa buzzed with conversations of diplomacy. Presidents and prime ministers in tailored suits and traditional robes moved with the grace of experience. Golden sunlight poured through towering windows, casting shadows across marble floors that had carried decades of political theater. On the surface, it seemed like another routine continental summit. But underneath the pleasantries, whispers hinted at something unusual. The heavy wooden doors opened with a thunderous echo, silencing the room. An elderly man entered slowly, dressed in flowing white robes, leaning on a simple walking stick. His weathered face carried the weight of centuries, and his eyes burned with intensity that made even seasoned presidents sit straighter. It was Sheikh Abdullah al-Maghribi, a revered Islamic scholar whose influence stretched from Casablanca to Cairo, from Khartoum to Dakar. He was not on the guest list. His unannounced arrival rippled through the hall, unsettling guards and politicians alike. Everyone knew his reputation. A man of deep Islamic jurisprudence and African history, a bridge between heritage and power. His words were rare, but when he spoke, nations listened. The sheikh reached the center of the hall. With a firm strike of his walking stick on the marble, he commanded silence. The leaders unconsciously formed a circle around him, as if drawn by invisible gravity. Among them stood Captain Ibrahim Traoré, younger than most, his military posture sharp among political elites. The sheikh's eyes scanned the circle, piercing into souls. And then, in classical Arabic, he spoke, his voice carrying the winds of the desert and the weight of history. Where are those who claim to represent Africa, but have forgotten the roots of wisdom that once made this continent a beacon to the world? The words hung heavy in the air. Many leaders fidgeted. Some glanced desperately at translators. But the moment was not for intermediaries. This was a test of authenticity, a call to the soul. The silence grew unbearable, exposing a truth. Africa's most powerful leaders were disconnected from their own heritage. And then movement. From the edge of the circle, Captain Ibrahim Traoré stepped forward. His heart pounded, but his voice came strong, clear, and fluent in Arabic. True leadership is serving the people with dignity, preserving our heritage, and rejecting the neo-colonial chains that seek to divide us. The hall froze. His words flowed like water from a desert spring. Authentic, rooted, unshakable. The sheikh's eyes widened in wonder, his face softening into relief. For decades he had searched for a leader who could bridge Africa's political power with its spiritual and cultural roots. And here he stood, a young captain, not yet corrupted by politics, but sharpened by struggle, discipline, and wisdom. The sheikh stepped closer, his walking stick tapping like a heartbeat. Tears filled his ancient eyes as he placed olive-wood prayer beads, 7 centuries old, carved in the courtyard of the great Mosque of Jen, into Ibrahim's palm. These beads, he whispered, have been waiting for a leader worthy of them. One who knows that Africa's strength lies not in imitating the West, but in honoring the wisdom of our ancestors. The hall became sacred ground. Cameras captured the moment, but what unfolded transcended politics. It was a divine appointment, a torch passed from scholar to soldier, from past to future. Within hours, footage of the exchange swept across Africa. In Dakar, youth in cafes replayed the video, eyes shining with pride. In Lagos universities, students stopped their studies to debate the meaning of authentic leadership. In Bamako markets, vendors spoke of a shift in power. Hashtags like #AuthenticLeadership and #AfricanWisdom trended across the continent. Elders in remote villages wept, realizing the heritage they thought lost was alive again. Imams wove Ibrahim's story into sermons. Teachers used it to inspire students. Mothers told their children to study, but never forget their roots. Across Africa, the whispers grew into a movement. But the impact was not limited to Africa. In Paris, London, and New York, diaspora communities shared the video with pride. In Beijing, analysts studied its implications. Western think tanks scrambled to frame it as geopolitical, missing the spiritual revolution it represented. Global commentators argued, was this cultural nationalism or authentic sovereignty? Meanwhile, in Timbuktu, ancient scholars nodded knowingly. They recognized the test. For centuries, African kings had been required to prove not just military strength but scholarly depth. Leadership was never meant to be empty power, it was sacred responsibility. Ibrahim's Arabic response was more than fluent speech. It was proof that Africa's next renaissance would be built on roots, not borrowed systems. Months passed, and the effects deepened. Across Africa, young leaders began studying Arabic alongside European languages. Universities revised curricula to include Timbuktu's manuscripts and indigenous knowledge systems. Politicians demanded economic partnerships built on respect, not exploitation. The artificial barriers between Arab Africa and Black Africa, between Islamic Africa and Christian Africa, began to dissolve. A new dawn was breaking. Music fused ancient Arabic poetry with modern beats. Schools taught children the stories of Mali, Songhai, and Ghana alongside global history. Communities rediscovered dignity in tradition. Africa was remembering itself, whole, unbroken, unapologetic. And it all began with one barefoot boy from Ouagadougou, who walked to school with worn textbooks clutched to his chest, and grew into a captain who carried the hopes of his continent. When Ibrahim Traoré answered in Arabic that day in Addis Ababa, he didn't just respond to a scholar. He answered the ancestors. He proved that authentic African leadership is not about fragments chosen for foreign approval, but about the complete heritage of a proud people. This is the Renaissance Africa deserves, and it has already begun.